Hello, and welcome back to AI Ramblings Daily. It's Monday, episode 53. We're going to get started on a whole bunch of things as usual going on, rapid flow in the world of AI that hopefully should matter to you, all you AI curious folk. I'm Michael Parekh, your host of AI Ramblings and your AI guide. First up, I had a post up yesterday on big report on Apple, which has been long rumored to be following in the footsteps, as it were, of Meta in terms of Meta's AI smart glasses, the Ray-Ban. These are the smart glasses Ray-Bans. They've got a number of models, Meta does. And Apple is going to come up with, looks like the rumblings are from Bloomberg, who has H reporter Mark Gurman, who tracks these things down. Apple is slated to now finally come down to looking at launching not one, not two, three, but four smart glasses, different sizes, colors, shapes, etc., all vertically integrated. Unlike Meta, they're not partnering with a separate major manufacturer of glasses in the world out of Europe, but they're going their own way, full stack, etc. I've got a lot of details written up on this in post Reset to Zero, AI Reset to Zero -RTZ, episode 1055. But the core things I wanted to touch on in this discussion is that Apple's strategy on these smart glasses in the next year or two, they'll launch some of these, looks like this year, later this year, is distinctly different than not just Meta, which has over 3 million of these glasses in use, apparently sold over 7 million of these glasses. So they're the current leader in units worldwide. Both regular glasses, like the ones I've talked about already, they take pictures, they access the Meta's own AI service. They allow you to listen to music through speakers that do bone induction and kind of listen to what you're saying through your face, etc. Very cool. People like it. They like the ability to take quick photos and videos, etc. But Apple is also going to be in this with, as I said, with four models, and we're going to see additional competing products from some of the big guys like Google, who's getting back into the glass business, and also Amazon is also in the race, along with formerly Snapchat, and a whole host of other players. And we're going to see a ton of options, all in the $300, $400, $500 range, lots of styles. They will accommodate prescriptions for extra charge, etc. The key thing I wanted to say here, which as a takeaway from my perspective, is Apple is doing what only uniquely they can do. Is they're going to leverage the iPhone, which they control obviously as a platform. They have full ability to do vertical integration from the silicon here to the silicon in the glasses, and so on, and create a much more differentiated product. Most importantly, leveraging the CPUs and the GPUs and the neural processors on these devices, the memory, the storage, etc. So in theory, the glasses can be a lot lighter. They'll have a lot of low latency connectivity to the phone, which most of the others can do only to an extent. They only have access to Apple's ecosystem at the app level, not at the operating system level. And that is a detail that is important. One of the big frustrations for a long time, and this is publicly discussed, is Meta's founder, CEO Mark Zuckerberg, has been uniquely frustrated that he does not have access to the innards, the operating system layer aspects of Apple's devices. So as a result, Facebook's Meta app, Facebook app, its Instagram app, WhatsApp app, and glasses do not have that level of connectivity, which is a disadvantage. And that is why the two major companies that have 3 billion people directly connected to their systems, which are Apple and Google, have a distinct advantage as long as they have the operating systems and silicon control, which some of those companies do. Meta is trying to build that. That's why they're so excited about glasses. They're spending over $10 billion or more so far in glasses of all type, glasses, the simple ones that I've described, ones with displays, and much fancier ones that they've shown off. And I've written a lot about it in prior posts, these AR glasses that today on a unit basis costs 10,000 or more because of the special diamond glass in them, etc. Over time, they'll be productized. So Apple is going to be a big player. And Apple typically, the other thing I'll just mention about them is they typically end up being late into a space, but when they do it, they redefine the category. Countless examples. The biggest iconic one is the music iPod, right? Which totally changed how we think about music in our pocket, 1,000 songs in your pocket, iPod. Prior to that, there were millions of units of music players out there. Creative Technologies, which I had helped take public when I was head of internet at Goldman Sachs many decades ago. But the Apple coming in late and then leveraging their ecosystem capabilities in hardware, software, etc., is legendary. And they're going to do the same thing, presumably with glasses, as they've done with the iPod, as they did with the iPhone, no less, in 2007, etc. And that is why everyone's watching this. That is why there's a lot of global attention on this and a lot of discussion around it and a lot more to come. So that's the first topic I wanted to talk about today on AI Ramblings 53. Second one is uh, Anthropic. I had some posts on this specifically. You can look at post number 1051 as an example, where they've just announced their new latest language model called Mythos. And they've not released it because there are lots of concerns. This is on brand for Anthropic, that they view themselves as the foremost in terms of security and safety of AI. So they've gone out and created this effort called Glasswing. They're working with 30, 40 companies around the world and the government for that matter, in terms of unearthing the cybersecurity risk of this much more advanced model. Apparently, this model is capable of being used by bad actors with a lot of effort and less effort than they would have otherwise, to break the security on so many systems, across legacy systems, across traditional systems, across the things that we do on our desktops and laptops and smartphones, etc. And so it is a big issue. So the topic I want to touch on here is Anthropic Mythos, Myth and Reality. This is going to be an ongoing discussion this year. This is the latest and greatest of not just Anthropic's model, on which Claude Code is going to, the next iterations of Claude Code, which is a beloved product ramping to billions of dollars by tens of millions of developers around the world. It's their hit runaway product that is literally giving OpenAI, its arch sibling competitor, a run for their money. But also, it is setting up the framework of cybersecurity concerns that is being emulated. OpenAI is also about to release imminently their next generation model, codenamed Spud, and they're doing the same thing. They're also talking to a lot of partners about the cybersecurity challenges of bad actors using their next generation model, Spud, and doing not so good things with them. So there's that. The related aspect of this is, what can these models do? And the benchmarks that some of the early people who have access to this seem to indicate that they are meaningfully, depending on what you're trying to do, meaningfully better on a number of activities: computation, physics, math, healthcare applications, etc., better than the earlier models. So that's all good. And now also, Mythos and Spot, presumably, these will also be, for a while initially, more expensive than the lesser models, as that's always been the case, and they'll come down in price. But the price differences today on the front looks like it's 3-5x. We'll see how quickly that comes down as more competition comes into the space. And so that'll be an important element. But I've talked about, and I'll have more to say on this later, but there is a distinct bifurcation today of AIs, regardless of whether you're using the latest ones or the current ones or the previous ones. And that is, the early adopters and developers use the more intense aspects of these capabilities, not just the chatbot pieces, but the AI agent functionality. And they use it far more aggressively than regular users. And so there's a distinctly different sense of perspectives on AI. If you talk to the developers, if you go to Silicon Valley, and every conversation is about how world changing these things are. Claude Code and Claude Cowork. I've written about it. I had a extensive piece this Sunday on how I found working with all of these intensely with my workflow and various computers and so on. So take a look at that. It's piece 1055 in the show notes. But the point is, for most regular people, let's say 900 million people that are reportedly using ChatGPT every month, most of them are using the free version of ChatGPT. Only 3, 4, 5% are subscribing to these things at $20 a month or more. And you don't get a real sense of what these models can really do, especially with AI agents, until you're at least at the $20 a month subscription tier. Very quickly, if you find it's doing something useful, the AI compute you're using up will hit a limit and it'll pause you for a few hours until you can come back and reset and start again. And so most people do subscribe to high levels. So I, for instance, am a $200 a month subscriber to Claude Cowork and Claude Code. Similarly, for Google Gemini's Ultra package, $200 a month. ChatGPT has a similar one, $200 a month. For that, you get gobs of 5x, 10x the amount of compute, depending on the brand. And then you can do a lot of intense things that take a lot of work, actually, a fair bit of engineering knowledge or familiarity. Not you don't need to compute or code or do code, but you do need to understand the innards of how these things work. It's early days. This will change. This will get productized by all of these companies in the next 6 months or so. But if you're sitting there as a non-coder, regular person, looking at all this and saying, "Oh my God, am I missing something?" etc. And the answer is yes and no. You're not getting a sense of what the more advanced models can do if you use it in certain ways, take the effort. But it is a workout. I had a post on that, as I said, on Sunday. It is a workout where you have to kind of learn new habits and try new things and then work with these things. So the myth and reality of Anthropic's Mythos, as and when we get access to it, is that there'll be a ramp on this as well. So I wanted to just highlight that and put a pin in that and come back on that topic in later conversations. The third topic I want to touch on today also, I've talked a lot about in various posts on the US China competition. I think overall, we are doing ourselves a disservice by bifurcating US and China, that there are a lot more things the two countries can do together on technology and trade than apart that are win-win for both of them, aside from the geopolitical kerfuffles and so on. And I have specific posts, numbers 767, 744, 819, lots of them that talk about these dynamics. The reason I'm bringing it up right now is that China and people from China, especially students who come to the US and become science and computer graduates in the US, are basically a huge component of how we are advancing AI research. When you look at all the scientists who work at various AI labs, Meta, OpenAI, etc., more than a third of them are Chinese students who came here, learned the trades, and then build lives here. Increasingly, we're finding that because of a lot of the geopolitical kerfuffle issues between the US and China, a number of them are choosing, especially the senior ones, are choosing to return to China. The Financial Times had a detailed article. They highlighted some 30 senior AI researchers who are leaving the US. And I think it's a flag to kind of be mindful of, particularly because half of the world's AI talent is from China, and China graduates 2, 3, 4x the number of STEM graduates. So they will have a lead versus the US if you want to think about it in the context of the US. And Jensen Huang, the founder CEO of NVIDIA, America's probably most valuable, if not one of the most valuable companies, has consistently said that we need to figure out how to work with China. And I wanted to highlight this topic that as much as it's being viewed as a competition, there is a dynamic short term where the US is losing some of the top Chinese AI researchers who are returning to China, getting lots of opportunities to build companies there, to go to work at very senior levels at the key companies there that are competing with the US companies, etc. And that is a trend that is new because the US traditionally has been a magnet for these best and the brightest, not just from China, but from India, from Europe, everywhere, rest of the world, to come here, to go to school here, get educated, and then legally process their way into the ecosystem here. And this development is a bit of a negative that we want to just make a note of. So I wanted to touch on that. The next topic I wanted to touch on, this is a section of the show that I talk about gadgets and AI. And we've talked about glasses ad nauseum a little bit in the last couple of shows and today. But I wanted to touch on another one that is very important because I had a friend just email me the other day, what gadgets do I like, excuse me, to take notes, electronic notes, and have it transcribed and then usable in a form that you can put into language models and do additional work with. And there are lots of free options on this. Uh, I tend to like these two gizmos from a company called Claude. This is not a sponsorship. It's just gadgets I use. PLAUD. They have a small one like a pendant and a pocket one, and you can record these things. They transcribe your meetings notes. Obviously, in half the states, you got to get the permission of the other parties. All of that, but there are bunch of examples of these kinds of gizmos. I wrote a detailed post on this topic as well. It's post number 709, which will be in the show notes as well, if you want to look at the other options. But the reason I'm going here is that Apple is rumored to be also working on a pendant device that will do some similar stuff. You're going to see similar efforts from Amazon. They just bought one of the companies called B, so you'll see a product from there. So again, just like the glasses, you're going to see a number of gadgets that are specialized in these ambient awareness things that take record of not just all the things you're talking about, meetings, etc. Cameras will be in some of these gizmos, but this is where we're going in terms of AI generated notes, and it's an obsession of mine for a long time. I love the gadgets, etc. But I wanted to touch on that because this is also part of the range of things that we will have to kind of evaluate, get used to, and convert into daily habits for use going forward. So I just wanted to put a pin on those forms of gadgets, AI note takers. The next piece of the show I just wanted to touch on are listener questions. My favorite listener and the folks who watch AI Ramblings input questions from them, and a couple that were interesting. I just wanted to highlight. Number one is just what was the biggest pain point I found in using the Claude Cowork? I had a post, as I said, this Sunday, 10:55. What was the biggest pain and surprise that I found using that? And the biggest pain is, and I'll write more about this because it's actually fairly important if you're going to be an early adopter, even a non-coder adopter of these technologies. These things still require a fair bit of familiarity in terms of how the systems work, even within the same company's products, Anthropic. So, for instance, Anthropic's Cowork, when you do the sessions on with Cowork, they work fine when you're in a session on, let's say, you're the Claude app on your Mac here. But the moment I do it on my phone in the Claude app, those two conversations don't know anything about each other. Each time the conversation is loading, they're loading specific memory files. They put it in context in the context window, and they don't necessarily talk to each other until you recognize that and you tell it constantly. By the way, find the other conversations here. The files are here. Go look at them, load them into your what's called a markdown file, an MD file. So it's all this mumbo jumbo that you have to do, which are not for regular users. Most users will not do this today. It's very similar to early days of personal computers, which most of you are too young for. But in the early 80s, you had to worry when you were working on a model of IBM MS-DOS PC with that one, a Compaq or a Dell or an IBM PC, etc. Each one had its own methodologies, and they didn't talk to each other. You had to work within very specific 640K memory constraints. It was a total pain, and we are at that pain stage of these language models. You move in functionality from the chatbots, which is relatively straightforward, ask questions, to do things for me and do them on certain schedules. All of that, and remember things about me and what I like, what I don't like. It will do that in the session that you're in, but the moment you're done with that session, start a new session. Unless you set it up in a complex way, it will not remember you when you come back, even a few hours later. It'll almost act like a new intern, because that's an analogy that everyone likes to anthropomorphize. And it's literally like you've worked with an intern, to use that metaphor, for hours or days. You thought that they know your style, methodology, preferences, etc. And then literally you started another day and it's just a blank slate intern and just doing it very, very early days. And you have to kind of refamiliarize them with everything again, and that's a pain. So I would say that is one of the biggest pain points, that these things don't talk to each other. I wanted to highlight that as the daily pain point of using these systems like Cowork today. Hopefully, it'll get fixed very soon. Second question I got, which I think is interesting: who's using which AIs in terms of market share? ChatGPT is probably the most known brand amongst the big AIs. They've consistently for months now said they have about 900 million. I presume they'll have updated numbers as they get close to whenever they're planning their IPO later this year. But they're the big gorilla, obviously. But Anthropic now has come very quickly with Claude Cowork, especially, that I've talked about. And I wouldn't be surprised if they actually become more of a consumer AI company in the next few weeks and months. Given the momentum they're further ahead than their other competitors on the AI agent piece. And there are a lot of early adopters today, meaning there are maybe 5 billion people who use AI services. And if you assume even 10% or 5%, which are typically the early adopter mix, start to use these things, we're talking about very large numbers. So Anthropic will more likely than not be a very close competitor. And then it falls down very quickly to other options, but not that far. Coming up very rapidly underneath is Google Gemini. I've written a lot about this as well, because Google Gemini is in Google search everywhere and on 3 billion daily searches and devices and users and so on. Then you got Meta AI. I wrote about them in a post earlier this week as well with their new Muse Spark system. They have access to over 3.5 billion people who use Instagram and WhatsApp and Facebook and Messenger. And so they have access to Meta AI. And as I said, the Muse Spark looks like it'll probably be good enough for everyone to use for basic chat and some eventual basic agent stuff, which is Elon Musk's XAI. AI today, most of it is accessible primarily through X, formerly known as Twitter. Hundreds of millions of users there. People ask questions to Grok all the time, regardless of its operating methodologies, etc. But that is one thing that Elon will have to also figure out, is how to get broader distribution for Grok beyond X Twitter, especially to use up the tens of billions of dollars of compute that he is investing in and building and going to public with SpaceX, presumably this June. So those are the 5 biggies, and there are lots of other options out there. But in terms of which are the big, who's using what AIs, that would be roughly in that order, but we don't have specific percentages on that yet. We will, as some of these companies get closer to doing their IPOs and so on. So we'll see how that goes. And in the meantime, I just wanted to, again, thank you for joining us for AI Ramblings Daily today, episode 53. Please shoot us questions, comments. Give us your thoughts on some of these topics. What do you think about which AI is better? What are some of the pain points, etc.? Let me know in the comments, etc. And also, as usual, appreciate a like and a subscribe on any of this. And thank you for joining us. Stay tuned. Back tomorrow with episode 54.